All right, so we come to Parsha Mata Masai. Let me say Matot Masai, Mata Masai. The word in anyway, it doesn't make a difference. We have to consider from this what's it going to teach us, considering that the name of the Torah portion means journey of the wooden staffs. Okay, journey of the wooden staffs, Matot Masai. Okay, so we have Matot, that means a staff or a rod, and we think of something along the terms of the Lamed, the instruction, guidance. How do we learn? What teaches us? And then Masa means journey. It means to go forward, but we have to keep in mind that it also means to go backwards. And if we think about the idea of the journey of wooden rods, well, the Hebrew word for wood, for tree, is etz. And the ancient idea of etz is discipline. So, what do we have here? Is our moving forward or our moving backwards is dependent on our ability to take in instruction, guidance, and the discipline that we have to nurture what we talked about Tuesday, that inner man, so that we know the difference. This is an older study, so I'm going to pick some things out and then we'll take a look at it, because there's a lot of stuff in Matot Masai, and I really want us to get a feel for what's going on and how this whole Torah portion applies to us. Amongst this is the desire of Reuben, Dan, and half of Manasseh to settle to the east of the Jordan. All right, so we've considered in past studies the idea of east, referring to things that go contrary or away from Elohim. Okay? The people of the east are usually where the pagan peoples were. But we have them settling east of the Jordan. The word Yardin means to drag down. Okay? So what do we allow into our belief system that drags us down and moves us east? Remember, Matot Masai, to move forward or to move backwards. And then we have the three tribes. Reuben, so exciting, firstborn, so they call him Reuben. Behold the sun. So exciting. But we look at the roots of Reuben. The root is Ra'ah. Ra'ah means to see, to behold. But Ra'ah also means to regard, to perceive, to discern, to regard, to consider, to pay attention to look closely at. Okay? And then we have Ben, all right, son, but the root of that is Bana. So what we can consider now is an idea in Reuben of our carefully considering what we are Bana, restored and established in. Okay? We'll come back to Dan in a minute. Dan means judge. But let's look at Manasseh. Manasseh means to forget, to neglect, to remove. All right? So if I regard, if I pay attention to what I believe I am restored and established in, is it something that I forget? Is it something that I neglect? Is it something that I have removed from my day-to-day activity? So this brings us to Dan, the idea of judging. Okay? If I say Matot Masai, if I am taking this journey, this moving forwards or backwards, according to the discipline that I have built into my life to receive instruction and guidance. Okay? I can do that. We talked about it a little bit Tuesday. How do I do that? I do it through prayer. I do it through study. I do it through communication. Okay? So these concepts lead us to something else that is interesting in Matot Masai. That there's 42 stops between Egypt and the Jordan. Okay? 42 stops between Egypt and the Jordan. And what we find is that along the way they get to the Jordan, where they can cross over the Jordan and enter into the Promised Land, but they choose not to. Okay? They come up with excuses and fear based on what they see as opposed to what they've been told. Elohim has given us a promise. Now, this is going to play into another 42 that we're going to look at in just a second. Our Elohim has given us a promise that we can cross over the Jordan, cross over those things that bring us down, and move into the Promised Land, a relationship with Him. What brings us down? Everything. Okay? Everything that touches the outer man affects the inner man. Okay? So how does this relate to now to the other 42? Say, what other 42? You've lost your mind. That medicine you're taking is too strong. There are 3 sets of generations, 3 sets of 14 in Matthew. Okay? You have from Abraham to David, from David to the diaspora, and from diaspora to Yahusha. Okay? Well, 14 times 3 is 42. 42. So, in this traveling, when we reach a point, what are we reaching at the end of this 42? We're reaching once again a choice. Okay, and the choice is that we can believe and receive Yahusha, believe and receive the Word, believe and receive the promise, and thus cross over from outside to inside, just like they had the choice to remain on the wrong side of the Jordan or to cross over and enter into the Promised Land. All of this deals with our ability to choose and our ability to have a desire to build the discipline in our lives to nurture the inner man. Okay, we had a big talk about the inner man Tuesday. We have to develop this discipline because it's the flesh, the stuff on the outside that gets in the way. So with that, let's take a look at some of these verses from Bamidbar. And we'll start with Bamidbar 31, verse 2, that it says, "Avenge the children of Israel of the Midianites, afterwards shalt thou be gathered unto thy people." Okay, so we've had this little Balaam thing that took place. Now Elohim is telling Moses, go and get them. But when you're done, you're going to die. Okay? That's what we read on the surface. But let's take a look. The verse begins with the word nekom, that means to avenge. It's the end game. Prapapam. Never mind. Okay. Means to avenge. And it's immediately followed by its feminine equivalent, which is nikimat, which also means to avenge. What do we have here? We have nekom, which is a masculine, followed immediately by a feminine of the same word. Something here is going to affect both our physical side and our spiritual side within this verse. Okay? So let's consider also that the word nekom means to fully avenge. Not to do it halfway, not to do it 1/4 of the way, but to go all the way. All right? We also have to take into account that the word avenge means more than to harm someone that has done us harm. It also means to exact a payment for wrongdoing. So in the event, we can understand that Elohim was telling Moses to return harm to the Midianites for their actions against the children of Israel and against Yahuwah Elohim as co-conspirators with Balak and Balaam. What must be clear here is that vengeance that is to be taken belonged to Yahuwah Elohim and not to the children of Israel. Okay? Who was ultimately offended? Who ultimately was insulted by this act between the Midianites and the children of Israel? It wasn't the children of Israel. Yahuwah. Okay? The vengeance here is Yahuwah's vengeance. Okay? And keep in mind, children of Israel are just a tool. Okay? Our Elohim's will is his will. We are a tool to bring about that will by our choosing to do it or not choosing to do it in the life that he's given us. Okay? So we'll come back to that, I'm sure. What we learn from this is that we must seek Elohim's wisdom to correct a wrong that has been done to us or that we have done to others, and not to attempt to take matters into our hands and simply shoot from the hip, trying to resolve the issue. That is a flesh thing. I get insulted. I get offended. I tell my young people on Sundays, they're all on vacation, so I'm not teaching them right now, but I ask them, what happens when you get offended? And this is actually from a comedian that uses this routine. What happens when you get offended? Nothing. Nothing happens when you get offended. Okay? How we deal with it. How we deal with it. Do I react to it, or do I simply respond to it? If I react to it, then I go to guns. If I respond to it, I think about what I'm going to say, and I think about, is this really worth being upset about? Because in a couple of minutes, I'm going to be gone, and I'm not going to worry about it. All right, so, all right. The word Midianim means strife, discord, and contention. The children of Israel were enticed away from the Torah of Yahuwah Elohim and had intimate relationships with the women of Midian, who followed pagan practices that went contrary to the Torah of Yahuwah. Do we see this? Do we see this idea in something else that we discussed prior? Okay, remember, Reuben, Dan, and half of Manasseh were going to settle on the east bank. Okay, when I consider that, do the things that I neglect cause me to settle on the east bank? Do the things that I neglect cause me to move towards, the word paganism is so overrated. Things that go contrary to Yahuwah Elohim. Okay? The children of Israel had relationships with the women of Midian, contrary to Yahuwah Elohim. Okay? Then, see, we've considered that the children of Israel represent either those who have been restored and established because they recognize Elohim as greater than they are, or that struggle against restoration because they're wrestling against Elohim. We take this idea from Jacob. Yaakov became Israel. But Yaakov and Israel are the only ones that go back and forth. He either is strong in the authority of Elohim, or he falls back into what has been supplanted in his life, or what he has supplanted. So something else that we consider in Bnei Yisrael is that those that are restored and established in the authority of Elohim. And if that is us, then I have to choose whether I am restored and established in the authority of Yahuwah Elohim, or whether I am choosing to become Manasseh, forget. And because I forget, and I replace, and I neglect, then I supplant the word of Yahuwah Elohim with my own thoughts. The inner man and the outer man have this conflict. Okay? All right, so this too is a choice. So what we can consider in this phrase is a representation of teshuvah. Both the masculine and feminine Hebrew forms of the word avenge are used. A word that we've considered to mean to exact a payment for wrongdoing. We must be willing to allow Elohim to guide us in doing this and not attempt to do so in a carnally minded state of mind. We have to allow Yahuwah Elohim to guide us and not allow ourselves to fall into a carnally minded search for solutions. This is where Matot Masai becomes important. The journey of the wooden staff, the moving forwards or falling backwards due to the discipline that I have in my instruction and in my guidance. Okay? Note also that this is done through me'et, which is an object pointer showing the children of Israel as the ones receiving the action being avenged. They are not declaring the vengeance themselves, but are being avenged by and through Yahuwah's declaration. It is through the word of Yahuwah, me'et, that we're able to make teshuvah and be justified. Okay? Yahusha made it possible for us at the Tav. One of the reasons that Yahusha died was not only to restore us back to a relationship with the Father and to restore the kingdom under Yahuwah Elohim and to restore the priesthood of Melchizedek, but he also died so that we, under the priesthood of Melchizedek, could recognize where we had chatat, stepped off track, recognize it, and make teshuvah. Okay? More than simply the idea of repenting, more than simply having this desire to turn around, but actually doing it. Okay? So Yahusha made that possible for us. That's one of the things that he made possible. The overall idea from this phrase is that we must be willing to fully make teshuvah by seeking Elohim in the name of Yahusha, both mentally and physically. Can I make teshuvah in my mind, but not make teshuvah with my body? No. Yaakov says that belief without action is useless. I can have the desire to repent all I want, but if I don't physically take the action to do it, then I haven't done anything. Only this way can we truly exact the payment for a bad choice. We can make teshuvah in a sort of manner and still suffer from the strife, discord, and contention of our choices because we still hold a grudge, which is another meaning of nekom. Or we can fully make teshuvah and be set free from it. So keep this in mind as we consider the next phrase. It says, afterwards shalt thou be gathered unto thy people. So we have this word for afterwards, which is achar, which can also mean following this. Now naturally, afterwards, following this, as soon as you're done with Midian, you're going to die. The next word is te'asef, that aside from to gather also means to remove. And the word for to here is el, that aside from to or toward also means regarding, on account of, and according to. And if we'll also consider that it's composed of the aleph that represents Yahuwah Elohim and the lamed that represents instruction and guidance, we can consider that something is to be regarded according to an account of the instruction and guidance of Yahuwah Elohim. Something that deals with, and you will be gathered to your people, requires the instruction and guidance of Yahuwah Elohim. Say that again. Something in the Hebrew that we're looking at, dealing with, and you will be gathered unto your people, requires the guidance of Yahuwah Elohim. Everybody with me? You catch that? Okay. All right. So, finally, we come to the word for your people, which is going to give us the answer, which is amecha, that from our previous studies, we've learned that am means people, comes from the roots amam, that means dark or dim. And when we look at am, people, and amam, dark or dim, the root letter of both of those is ayin. Ayin means eye, perception, light. Okay? So what we have is a dark or dimmed perception. So what we can consider from this verse is that we must be willing to fully make teshuvah physically and spiritually by regarding the instruction and guidance of Yahuwah Elohim. Only in this will we be recompensed for bad choice, Following this, we have a clear vision as to what to do as our dark or dim perception will be removed. Okay? So yeah, we read it. After this, Moses, you're going to die. You're going to be removed from your people. But when we look at it from an instructional point of view, there are steps to teshuvah. I have to be willing to remove the dark or dim perceptions that keep me from making teshuvah the way I should. Because to make teshuvah on my terms according to the flesh is never really going to be teshuvah. I have to seek my Elohim in order to understand it clearly. Okay? Otherwise, I fall right back into the Reuben, Manasseh, and Dan thing. That my restoration and what I'm established in is what I perceive based on my neglect. What I've removed because I don't want to deal with certain things in the Word, and I judge them to be irrelevant. Okay? And if I do that, I settle on the east side of the Jordan. I'm never going to cross over the things that bring me down. Why? Why did these 2.5 tribes want to stay in that area? Because they saw with their eyes that the land was lush for their cattle. On the other side of the Jordan is the promised land that Elohim is promised to them. But I don't want that. I want what my physical senses tells me is good. Okay? This is when we settle east of where we should be. All right? All right, so let's see. Only this will we be recompensed for a bad choice. Following this, we'll have a clear vision as what to do as our dark or dim perception will be removed. This is a life application. We can also consider an application that deals with our seeking the Father in spirit and in truth. We must be willing to recognize false church dogma and rabbinical decree that separates us from our Elohim, and then make full teshuvah in order to remove those scales from our eyes, our dark or dim perception that prohibit us from fully yielding to the Torah of Yahuwah Elohim. All right, so that's kind of churchy, kind of religious, kind of... the thing is, we have to consider it from that point of view right now, especially in the direction that religion is moving. Okay? The dogma, the doctrine is so accepting of things that are contrary to the word of Yahuwah Elohim that it's very easy to be sucked into that. Okay? Yes, I want to keep this as a life application thing, but we have to understand that although we try to separate this whole, I have my religion and then I have my life, my relationship with Yahuwah Elohim is all-encompassing. Okay? There is no separation of church and state. My state of being is dependent on my relationship with my Elohim. But I bring this up for us to become aware of dogma and doctrine within our own lives, because we all have dogma and doctrine that we still hold on to. What do we do with that dogma and doctrine, whether it be from the church fathers or rabbinical decrees, when we discover that it is not something that we should hold on to? Okay? And I'll go back to our discussion yesterday. Instead of saying it's easier to dig up a redwood with a tablespoon, and say it's easier to dig up a pecan tree with a tablespoon. Ed pointed out that the root is just as deep as the tree is tall. Okay? And imagine if your belief system in things that don't line up with the word of Elohim are rooted at the very bottom of that root. Okay? So it's very important. Yes, we have to encompass the wholeness of our relationship with our Elohim. There's no, this is my life and I happen to go to church, for lack of better words. This is my life within Yahuwah my Elohim, in which I live and move and have my existence, and there is no going to this service or going to that service or going here or going there. It's all part of the life that we've been given. Everybody with me? All right, good. All right, so we're coming up on Yom Teruah and Yom Kippur, so it's a good idea for us to keep all this in mind. So let's take a look at verse 3. And Moses spoke unto the people, saying, Arm ye men from among you for war, or for the war, which is interesting, it says the war, that they may go out against Midian to execute Yahuwah's vengeance on Midian. So we have the phrase, and Moses spoke to the people, saying, we will first consider the word, dabar, that aside from speak means declaration, a promise, a proclamation, commandment, warning. Okay? The name Moshe means to draw out. The word for saying is emor, that means to something spoken from the heart. Again, we have the El that means both towards as well as against, as well as according to and account of. In the letters of the word, we consider the Aleph to represent Yahuwah Elohim and the Lamed to represent instruction and guidance. In the word people, Ha'am, we recall a representation of our darker dim perception. So we take all of that stuff and we chop it up real fine and we throw it into a pot and we come out with an idea. Okay? Y'all get an idea of how we come about this. We look at every Hebrew word. We look at every letter. We bring up the idea. What is it saying to me? How do I apply this? And what we get from this is that we must be able to draw out the declarations, proclamations, and given in the heart of Yahuwah's instruction and guidance, his Torah. Remember the last letter of the Torah is Lamed, first letter is Beit. You put them together, they spell heart. So that we can truly overcome our darker dim perceptions. Okay? We must be able to draw out the declarations, proclamations, and promises, commandments, warnings, as given in the heart of Yahuwah's instruction in his Torah, so that we can truly overcome our darker dim perceptions. This is not a religious idea. If I say that I am in a relationship with Yahuwah my Elohim, and in him I live and move and have my existence, and that I am part of the family because I am a child of Elohim, I'm restored and established because of the authority of Elohim. Yahusha made it possible. He is my high priest. He is my master. Then I must take this as a part of my regular day-to-day life. I don't have a day-to-day life that I put on hold to go somewhere to worship. I have a day-to-day life in which Yahuwah is just as present in my life as, let's say, Trina is in my life. I see my wife every day. My Elohim is just as present and just as precious in that life. You know what I'm saying? You're not stopping to go have a relationship and then putting the relationship on hold so that you can get on the rest of your life. You're driving down the street and you feel the presence of Elohim in the car with you. Okay? All right. So, let's move on. Okay, so we must arm ye men from among you for the war, so that we may go against Midian. In the first phrase, we might consider topically that we're to put on spiritual armor that we've discussed in previous studies. Okay? You got that helmet that protects your thoughts. You got the breastplate that protects your emotions. You got that thing on your waist that protects what you digest. You got that protects you from getting your feet stepped on when people say you're nuts. Nobody in here has ever heard that, though, so it's good. Okay. So let's consider a little deeper than that, though. The word for arm is chachalatzu. Sounds so Japanese. Chachalzu. That does not immediately mean to arm. It literally means to strip off and to withdraw. This word also means to equip, prepare, and to make strong, to invigorate, and to prepare to deliver. So if we take into account what we considered in the first phrase, we could formulate an idea of stripping off our dark or dim perceptions in order to become equipped and made strong and invigorated. I've got to strip away the dark or dim perceptions that keep me